When it comes to the search dogs in tracking Kenny Veach's scent, as crucial as it was, were there any hidden failures or limitations to explain why the scent ended at the mine shaft? Join me today as we get a little bit closer to the truth behind Kenny Veach's whereabouts and the failures by search and rescue. Hi there, welcome to the Kenny Veach M-Cave mystery. Today we're focusing in on a very important comment by a viewer on my channel, credit to them. And what I do want to say before we go any further, big shout out to everyone that has returned back to my channel in regard to the case and all the new people that have shown up recently. Really important timing. And a big thank you to those that have watched the video yesterday. In terms of, just the reach, it's there. That's good to see. It encourages me to keep on going. As for the stamina, and focusing today on the dogs because there are some very crucial factors which do need to be explained and could be valid as to why the scent was limited. Beside, the previous observations of maybe Kenny went so far, double backed on himself. Maybe if his scent went on any further, that would be fresher, and anything before would expire with time, or maybe the scent dispersed elsewhere. We've considered these different possibilities, but there are some side factors as well. And I can compare it with, to an extent, the Dylan Rounds case, the first ever true crime case that I covered when moving on from Kenny Veach onwards in, I think it was late 2022 or mid 2022. So appreciate your patience. Welcome if you're here during the live premiere. Share your thoughts in the live chat on the right. And for everyone else and watching on catch up, drop a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Do you think the search and rescue had failures and limitations such as with the dogs and tracking the scent? If they did it quicker, if they did it on a different day, would it have been any better? You've got to take in consideration search and rescue can only do so much when it comes down to the timing of the girlfriend reporting Kenny Veach missing 7 to 8 days later from November 10th onwards. And then such as the 22nd of November, that specific search being conducted, or the first one supposedly, quite a bit of time has elapsed in between. So there's many different factors to take in mind. And what we're going to head on over to now is a comment by a recent viewer and what they had to say about it. Known as Jimothy, they said, in regard to scent tracking, it is correct that in tracking scent trails along a scent timeline, the most recent scent deposited down is that of the strongest and earliest scent marks are that of the weakest, meaning they're going to fade away. But taking into consideration, the longer the dogs are out there actively working, which is the moment they're released, the more fatigued they become and less effective at their job. The consideration of fatigue also applies to the human handler. Tracking is a team effort. Each member of that duo complements the other's weaknesses with their strengths. Trained dogs are amazing, but not perfect. They're limitation and can only do so much. It's the handler's role in that team to interpret what the dog is telling you, indicating, along with also to keep the dog focused and on course. If searchers aren't helicopter dropping in the dog teams at the point where last contact has been established, for example, the mine shaft where the phone was found, those teams working in that environment will probably be exhausted by the time they reach the mine shaft, being less effective to a level reduced down to useless. Before we continue on with his comments, it's important to acknowledge the map analysis, the distance, when taking in consideration of the search team. For example, the 22nd of November, it was mentioned by the official news group, I think K3 News, on the day that besides the phone being found, Kenny's car was found parked too, meaning they probably started down at the bottom of Joe May Canyon, also known as Joe May Road, walking about, looking around, getting the scent of Kenny, possibly using a familiar item of Kenny from his house for the dog to become familiarized with the scent, and then comparing that to the possible scent of Kenny, which is out there, and tracking it, for example, highlighted in yellow, and following it up that way, just like how a recent hiker did so, taking 3 to 4 hours. And that can apply to different hikers going out there. The same with search and rescue. And with them having dogs, whilst at the start, the dogs are energized, so are the handlers, the scent being quite fresh and ready as best as can be, and tracing it as far as it can go, or as far as the human and the dog can. The fatigue is real. Different cases, different environments. This one, a very demanding place because of the temperature, the humidity, the steepness, the gradient, the terrain, the texture, and the remoteness of it, and the distance. It takes quite some time to get to the mine shaft. So whilst the dogs are making their way up, and so are the handlers, covering all that distance on foot to get to the marker round here, just before Wild Horse Pass. This is the mine shaft. This is where Kenny Veach's phone was supposedly found, and coins. And I say supposedly because we still need to do a video at some point on the second mine shaft recently found by SB, not far from this location. But just using this as an example for now. Once they got here and then the scent ended, could it have gone any further? Well, if Kenny Veach did go further, technically the scent should be stronger onwards and not before. But could the dogs have become ineffective with time by spending time out there? It's a possibility. But we've got to take in consideration there wasn't lots of searches done over days and weeks. It was quite short term, and it felt like people gave up on the case too soon, including the family. Now, there's some side theories that maybe the family gave up on it quickly because some of them knew where Kenny Veach could be at, and he's not in the desert area. It could link to the scent ending at the mine shaft and doubling back to be picked up by a possible family member or even the girlfriend. It's worth taking into consideration. But in terms of the distance, whilst we have the time, 3 to 4 hours to cover on foot, 3 to 4 hours of dogs tracking the scent. Yes, fatigue could play a role, and it could eventually lead to the scent becoming ineffective or lost with the dog through tiredness, through the senses being drained and used. And even if the dogs were to be used a different day and they returned back to the ground zero, which is the mine shaft, naturally the scent onwards would just wear away with time, making it harder. And if searches are limited and not followed upon to that extent, it can be forgotten. So roughly, and this is just a rough estimate or so, 3.55 miles. Just remove that, 3.55 miles or so. As for where the search and rescue crews and the vehicles parked up, maybe somewhere down the road near to Kenny's vehicle, but then having to set on foot around this area, as you see, Little Jomay Canyon. Over 3 miles to get to the mine shaft, 3 to 4 hours. And likely the search and rescue and dogs may have been going at a slower pace in making sure they cover all angles and perspectives, possibly. Now, were the dogs used anywhere else? It was said it wasn't acknowledged. Could they have been used elsewhere? Could it have led to a different result? You never know. There's always that possibility. So it is limited. Now, besides the distance and time, besides the capabilities of the dogs, in terms of transportation, as the comment suggested, if they were airdropped in by a helicopter, is that possible? Well, there are possible areas where a helicopter could land. And you know what's most strange is that back in 2024, early 24, Jay Chuck did set out there, and he was going to go down Jomay Road, but there was a slight problem in that the road was closed off. He couldn't get down it. There was a barrier, and it was what was found on a later hike within the area of where Kenny Veach hiked, over this way, down the canyon which Kenny Veach was searching, past the selection of M-shaped caves in which unusual track marks were caught on camera.
これは何ですか? この道。こちらは何が起こったのか? 操你妈,操你妹,操你爸! Probably for vehicle.
The reason why I'm sharing this with you as an example, because it does imply that there has been additional activity out there, and not just by hikers. Maintenance, checkups, how far did they go down Jomay Road? Well, they must have gone further enough in order to get to the hiking areas. But what changed drastically afterwards when the road just opened up once again? There weren't any changes. When J Chuck went down there, when SB and Jeff Clark, there wasn't any significant changes, but there are visible track marks on the ground, even lines deep ruts further on where there would be no access for vehicles, only the possibility of helicopters landing. And that's how it could link to the comment made when it came to the dogs back then. Likely dogs weren't deployed by helicopter or dropped down, meaning the distance had to be covered on foot. And you can imagine the distance, as we said, that it would lead to fatigue. If the dogs were dropped off near to the mine shaft, maybe the scent could have been stronger, fresher, and continued further on over Wild Horse Pass and to track Kenny further north. But that opportunity was wasted and lost. But when dealing with this in early 2024, a mystery itself, which needs to be revisited some other time. I want to know your thoughts on the matter, because maybe you've never seen this before or heard of. How often is this road closed? Not often. But on the time when J Chuck decided to head out, he was the first and only person to come across something like this, because all other hikers before and after didn't have to deal with this type of roadblock. As simple as the signs may be and you could drive round or onwards, it's what may lay ahead where it could prove difficult in either moving on or turning round. So sometimes it's best just to listen and follow to the signs and to leave. However, it's the mysteries of what was going on at the time. And you let me know if you can see the track marks, the ruts, the disturbance to the dirt on the ground scattered about. And then when looking up close too, as you see there, where the arrows are pointed, there's been a bit of a clearing. And you see the track marks, whether they be excavator ones or some other type of off-road vehicle. You can let me know your thoughts down below. But I just thought I'd use this as a link. As for the theme of transportation, how far one can go. Hikers have gone up that way and eventually parked up to then go on foot, just like how Kenny Veach did. Likely, just like what the search and rescue crew did, driving up down that way as far as they can go, coming across Kenny's vehicle and then deploying the dogs from there. Now, did they search the vehicle before they went to the mine shaft? Who knows? Because if they spent time searching the vehicle, they're wasting time in the possible sense, dispersing whilst they're there. So every second counts in the mountainous areas onwards of interest. But hopefully you can see the disturbance to the ground, some of the slight track marks which were there at the time. And it's the fact that there wasn't much brought up in terms of discussion in the area by DNWR and in general, that when hikers returned back, when the road was finally open, there wasn't any drastic changes before or afterwards. But in the moment when it was closed, some vehicles had gone down there, but were they work related? Was it military? It's open to interpretation. But the most chilling, mysterious part, as said, when it comes to the actual hike just before reaching Pitcher Canyon when Kenny Veach was walking down there himself, and then on the right you had them M-shaped looking caves, and then off camera to the left that supposed covered up cave. Well, when J Chuck finally got down there himself a different time, later, post this, He couldn't then because the road was closed. But a few months later or so, when returning back and having access, these marks appeared in the ground which weren't there previously, and they're in parallel to one another. Now, depending on the width, the spacing of it, you could argue and say, is that some kind of landing area where a helicopter landed and then the bars pressed into the ground, leaving ruts and imprint? And why would it be exactly here, for example? Is there enough clearing and space? Maybe. Just outside an M-shaped looking cave, near to the Keyhole Cave, which is covered in bushes. The Keyhole Cave is the mystery hole where there appeared to be a reptilian eye looking through. I've done some video documentation on that, and with credit to the original footage, Sean Horlacker, that caught it on camera, unknown to him at the time. The M-shaped cave, being back there behind J-Chuck, is the one prominent one. It's not deep enough, but it does look like a capital M at least. And then off camera to the left, over that way, is the supposed covered cave, a key hotspot area, the same area where Jeff Clark took a photo. Just like where J-Chuck was, there was a boulder or a rock nearby, just in front of the M-shaped cave, and there was a skull on top which Jeff Clark took a photo of and carried on going further up, as in the reverse hike of what Kenny would have done. And when getting round the bend, before approaching or going up Wild Horse Pass, going up a bend, uphill, taking another photo, somewhat north, also slightly northwest, near an agave burn pit. I've done a video on it for reference. However, the time difference was excessive, like 2 hours plus time difference, under a mile covered on foot. SB at a later point going out there too, losing footage randomly in this stretch of area. Unusual activity going on. Could it be some bandwidth frequency interference, military interference, equipment hidden away in the area? And that when it came to 2024, with searches taking place before and onwards, and it garnering the attention publicly and getting more popular with time, but the military, despite wanting a land proposal takeover in the past and not being successful, they decided to take further action, close the road off, head on down and make some adjustments or changes, move equipment on, remove things, add stuff, fill in areas, fill in caves, add surveillance. The possibilities are endless, but one thing that does appear apparent is there was activity by an unknown group of people or person that accessed the road when it was closed, and some possible transportation caught on camera here. When you look at the ground, there's dark lines, deep ruts in the ground, and some have suggested it resembles the base of a helicopter which may have descended. That in itself is very strange considering the area it is. Does it have anything to do with Kenny Veach? Does it have more to do with the M Cave? Is it military intervention? And what were they doing there at the time? It's very creepy. And if it is possible that a helicopter was responsible for landing in an area like this, it implies that it's also possible if search and rescue had a helicopter to do the same thing, but closer to the mine shaft in order to track Kenny's scent and to be able to go on further if needed. Now, returning back to Jimothy's extended comment, he said, also, deserts are hard on everything. The heat, the sun, the dryness all impact the tracking teams in all sorts of ways. The dryness reduces the scent cone. There's also less obstacles like vegetation to transfer scent onto. Sunlight and wind help disperse odours. And being a desert, there's little shade and ample wind flow. The terrain is difficult and hard wearing on teams, especially the dogs' feet. Then there's the heat, a critical factor that reduces all the senses in both parts of the team, making them less effective and more likely to miss things and make errors. Another environmental factor is You don't want it to rain after someone goes missing or during a search, but a little bit of rain just before the disappearance, like the morning of or day prior, is ideal conditions in a scent tracking situation. Some crucial points mentioned by Jimothy there, and in addition to that, online it highlights that when tracking a missing person's scent can be affected, factors such as the age of the trail, weather conditions, temperature, wind, humidity, and terrain. We've got to take in mind that when it came to Kenny Veach, whilst he was reported 7 to 8 days too late, the actual search conducted where they found the phone and the scent was the 22nd of November, meaning 12 days later a search was done. That with that time, the scent can just fade in its own right. If the search was done the day after Kenny's disappearance, the 11th or the 12th of November, who knows what it could have yielded then. But it would have also required the girlfriend to have made the missing person report as soon as possible, which she didn't. And it's very weird that. Anyway, it says experienced dogs can successfully follow a 12-hour-old trail and have a reasonable chance with one up to 30 hours old. Well, many hours have passed by when it comes to 12 days in, though, post-disappearance, making it a lot harder. A clean scent article, like a sterile gauze that captured the person's unique scent, provides a strong starting point for the dog. How scent tracking works, if you're interested, a handler can use a sterilized piece of gauze to collect a person's unique scent, which contains a combination of bacteria from their skin, environmental odors, and volatile organic compounds from their breath. This is often done by placing the gauze against the skin or in the mouth. Dog training. Dogs are trained to differentiate the scent from the article from all other odors in the area. They can focus on following the specific trail left by the missing person, even in busy environments. Now, the environment that Kenny Veach was in wasn't busy whatsoever. And as for vegetation, well, it's debatable that it wasn't thick with bushes and trees, but there would have been a lot of ground level vegetation in certain areas, at least, as you've seen in SB Vegas Adventures hikes. But of course, the time of the season can impact the growth and the amount of vegetation out there. So when Kenny Veach is walking by and glancing by vegetation, less of it, you're not going to leave your scent behind the same way. The scent trail is a mixture of ground scent, scent that's left on the surface, and air scent, odor particles carried by wind. Scent diffusion spreads out from the source, forming a scent cone that can be affected by terrain and weather. Factors that do affect success, the timing in general. Survival decreases significantly over time. A 12-hour-old trail is often the most reliable, whilst older trails become much more difficult. And this ain't 12 hours old. We're talking over 30, 40, 50, 60 hours plus, because it's 12 days onwards. Temperature. Hot and dry conditions can cause scent to dissipate quickly. Cooler conditions like those at the night or in the early morning can help scent last longer. But regardless of when the search was conducted, morning or night, the reality is it was done too late, and the weather over that time did not help because it is hot and dry out there and humid. The wind aspect can disperse scent over a wide area, making it harder to track. And the reality is, when we've seen hikers out there themselves recording with their microphones and the wind is so noisy and loud, it kind of muffles, and you can't even hear the hikers' voices at times when speaking because it's so windy out there and open, like a field to some extent. But whilst you might have canyons, whether they be narrow or more so wider in the key areas what we're referring to and where the search was done, sometimes it can create a bit of a wind tunnel as well. So if you've got an open space, a lot of wind blowing about to disperse the scent, making it harder to track onwards if it was to. In regard to sunlight, direct sunlight can dry out and destroy scent vapors, and that's why it mostly was like out there. Terrain, different surfaces affect scent survival. A human scent may last longer on grass than on asphalt. And there was some kind of vegetation out there, but a lot of it is just like grainy gravel and dryness. Experience, The experience level of the dog and handler is crucial. Veteran dogs have a much higher success rate. Novice dogs, not so much in difficult conditions. But that's a question in its own right. Did Red Rock Search and Rescue use experienced dogs or amateur ones? With knowing these additional factors which can greatly impact the scent when searching for Kenny, how does it apply to the weather real time back then? I found this website, Past Weather in Las Vegas, Nevada, November 2014. Time and date, the name of the website. And when scrolling down to here, it gives a bit of a timeline. So if we was to go back to the 10th of November and get an idea when Kenny Veach was out there at the time, over the course from 000 in the morning to 1800 hours, for example, the highs, the lows, the temperatures, the readers, and I think we go down here. Now, as for the timing of when Kenny Veach did set out, probably 6 to 12 in the morning, and it's at the time 21 degrees Celsius, classified as sunny, humidity 23%, wind 0 miles per hour at the time. Later on in the day, wind increased to 10 miles per hour, humidity dropped, temperature increased to 28. Take in mind, it only gives certain times of the day. Okay, so there's a bit of a jump in between. Then, for example, on the 11th of November, if I scroll down to 23, wind quite low, 28% humidity, much higher. And then the 12th of November, 46% humidity. And then during the day, 27%. And 8 miles per hour on the 13th of November. So you get the idea of how things can go. And then Saturday, 15th of November, wind much higher at 17 miles per hour, humidity as well, a fair number. With these factors, this is what can cause scent to be lost. In fact, Kenny Veach went missing on the 10th. A search was done on the 22nd. And in between, we're seeing the weather, the changes to it. The humidity, 34% on the 14th of November. These are going to impact 30% with wind too. And if we're referring to on the actual day, okay, you can always pause the video if you want when looking at this timeline. But if we go closer to the 22nd, 000, 43% humidity with slight wind, 15 degrees Celsius, 35% humidity, 21 degrees Celsius. And take in consideration, I'm not too sure if people in the US use Fahrenheit or degrees Celsius, but this is just how it appears on screen. You might need to convert it. Humidity, 23%, wind, 13 miles per hour. So it's somewhat fair, the temperatures. Got to take in mind, it is November as well. That does take into account. But there are factors here, and the timing over the days to imply that the scent would have been impacted, and it wouldn't have done the dogs much good either when trying to get an accurate reading. Go back over here, 14, 16 degrees Celsius with high humidity and high wind. Now, with that all being in mind, it does show that search and rescue was somewhat limited with maybe the resources that they had and how they were applied. But maybe give or take, whilst you can't control the weather aspect, you might not be able to control when a person decides to report someone as missing. What can you do in other ways to control it, to get the best outcome? And that might just be down to the transportation, to reduce the fatigue of the dogs from the handlers. Because whilst they may be experienced with hiking to some extent, are they used to that exact type of terrain where it is much more harsh, more demanding, and normally hikers wouldn't normally set foot out in an area like that. And if most hikers don't set foot out in areas like that, then they're likely not to go missing in areas like that, meaning search and rescue crews aren't likely to go through that often. That's just my analysis. You can disagree down below. But when it came to the Dylan Rounds case, Lucin, Utah, 28th of May, 2022, the day of Dylan's death, and the case stretching on from the 28th of 2022 up to April 9th of 2024, when Brenner, the killer, decided to reveal the location. The reason why that's so crucial is, in the early days, a dog unit was supposed to be used, bloodhounds, but they weren't. It was cancelled. The excuse was by the handlers, the LE, that because there was a chance of rain, or it was going to rain, it would have reduced the success rate down to 20%. Now, in my opinion, whilst it reduces the chances much lower, a chance is better than no chance. So you might as well make the most of what you've got, and in the moment, especially earlier on when it matters most. At the time, it was partially treated as a missing person case, but then deemed into a recovery mission, finding the body, whether it's buried or hidden somewhere. And that's why the cadaver dogs were used, canine units, volunteers as well, down the line. But despite all that being done, it wasn't the dogs that directly found Dylan's body. It was the killer that decided to strike a deal, make a plea deal years later to then reveal the location where they buried Dylan Rounds. So, and in that case, a full spectral drone was used. See, the difference is a person was buried in Dylan Rounds' case. Kenny Veach, it's unknown of whether he's buried or not, whether he's been scattered or not, whether he's even out there or not. But a drone can't be used within that area of the Mojave Desert, Little Jermay Canyon, not allowed. And I think that's because of links with the nearby military land and all of that, and just rules and regulations. So if you can't use a drone, and if search and rescue can't either, it does hamper things along the way. But just to put into perspective, in Lucin, Utah, where it can be dry, it can be humid, it can be hot, it did rain to some extent on the 28th or the 29th. So days afterwards, when dogs could have been used, and the rain would have impacted the scent to some extent, right? And that could also explain why the dogs couldn't find Dylan's body and so on. But the fact that a full spectral drone officially was used in that case and hovered all over the area for ground penetrating radar, soil disturbance if something was buried, right? Which was the case. And even that couldn't find Dylan's body at the time. It says a lot. Whether it be a failure by some, or the timing of when it was done, and the scent being an issue too, and the weather, and the police themselves not being proactive early. You can point the fingers in all different directions and consider, of course. But at the end of the day, even when you've got all the right stuff, maybe not at the right time, it's not always good enough. As for Kenny Veach, would it have been if drones were able to be used? I mean, if you're dealing with a missing person, presumed to be scattered out, not scattered out there, but maybe laying flat on the ground, face down, face up, slightly stuck down a canyon or in some kind of hole, and providing from a satellite aerial viewpoint you can look down and see it fairly clearly, a drone could be of high use, but they're not allowed to be used. But were there any exceptions? Could you gain permission if you're of authority, or there's a strong reason to be using it? We didn't see anything mentioned in articles about drones being used, whether they were fully in use at the time or not, back in 2014, but nevertheless, a wasted opportunity besides the dogs and how they may have been handled and the type that were used and the experience level behind them. As said, Red Rock Search and Rescue have been quite tight-lipped about it. Now, if they gave out more details as for the search conducted, the dogs used, and all about that, then we could learn more besides what we already know of in terms of the weather report and the factors of how that can impact the scent. So as for Jimothy, he made some very important points and comments, and I can relate to it in understanding because the Dylan Rounds case showed those limitations and problems with the cadaver dogs and scent, and that when certain things were conducted and scents were picked up by dogs, whilst they were picked up on, they weren't followed up on by the police, Box Elder County Sheriff's Office. So the DNA, the scents just faded away with time because they were neglected. Whilst the case may have been handled early on, the evidence found along the way wasn't followed up on immediately, and that's why it was wasted. In the Kenny Veach case, the actual search and stuff conducted wasn't even started early on, and that's why things can be wasted as with potential evidence and scent. So we could have been looking at a different outcome and scenario if the search was conducted quicker, earlier, and if the girlfriend actually reported Kenny Veach missing much sooner than what she claims. Because what she claims, it was 2 to 3 days, but on the police report, 7 to 8 days. Why would you lie? Really weird what's going on out there in the desert and with the people's responses and behavior. If you feel the same way, or if you've picked up on additional points and factors, theories, ideas, whether you agree or disagree, be sure to leave all your comments and thoughts down below. It is appreciated, and I can respond back later. With all these discussions, it can push the videos out there so there's more awareness. If you are on mobile, it'll be appreciated if you scroll across from the comments and hit the hype button on mobile. It spreads a video awareness and more people get to hear about it. If you're simply interested in catching up on my recent videos, which are just as important and shocking in trying to learn about Kenny, the possible location of the M Cave, that's available top right corner where the ice symbol is up there with the full playlist too. And if you do want to support the channel just in general, a pinned message in the comments by me with a PayPal link and channel membership. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to hit the thumbs up, share the video so as many people get to see it. My name is Warlight Raf. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night for now.